Okay, so now we're going to be talking about state. And for React, state, it's kind of important. So there's no easy way to understand this. And if you don't completely get it, don't worry, we're going to use it the whole time. So you're going to get it by practice. So the state, it's an object that serves us like a database. So we can store values, we can check for events, we can pretty much control how the application behaves through state. So remember we talked about functional components and class-based components. Well, every time we create a class, just like this one we have right here, we get by default from React a default state. And if we have a functional component, not like this one, we don't have the ability to get a default state. The functional components don't have state, and they are stateless. And you're going to hear that term a lot, stateless. But class-based components have a state. So how can we set a state? So I'm going to say state, just like this. Just use the keyword state, and this one is going to be equal to, and we open and close an object. So right here we can put whatever we want. I'm going to say keywords, just like an object, and keywords is going to start with hello. Okay. So the class starts. We're going to set a default value for keywords inside the state. So inside the render, what I can do a console log of this.state.keywords, just like this. So when the application starts, it's going to recognize the state, it's going to read the function, and then it's going to do the render, and we're going to get the keywords of hello. So we get hello. That's good. But if you notice, this looks like an object. So what's the difference between using the state, and a regular object? The thing is that if we change the state, React is going to recognize that you're changing the state, and since this is a special property, it's going to re-render the application. It's going to say, oh, okay, so the dude changed the state, so I'm going to re-render the application because now for this keywords, we have a new value. That's the main idea of state. So I'm going to comment this, the console log. And right here, instead of doing the console log from the change handler, if I type something, we are not getting anything on the console. I want to change the state. So in theory, if I change the state every time I type something on the input, this render should render again, and we're going to get the new state of keywords. Okay. So to set states, we need to use a predefined method. We need to use a special method that React is going to give us. It's going to be this dot, and we use the set state. And of course, method. Inside, we need to pass an object, and now we need to make a reference of whatever value we want to change. So we're going to say keywords. Now, every time we type something, keywords is going to be equal to event.target.value, which is equal to whatever we are typing right here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it down here. Now, if I type something, we're going to get an error. And remember I told you about the bind property? Okay, I'm going to use it right now, and at the end of this section, I'm going to explain you why I'm using bind and then this. So, okay, the application reloads. So if I type something, it's going to go to the change handler. This one is going to set the state, and since we are setting a new state, the application is going to re-render. Okay, so I'm going to type an F, and we are getting the value. It's doing this console log, so it's doing the render again. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Not like that. Okay, there we go. So right now, if I type something else, FA, and this console log, it's doing the FA. If I type an R, we are getting far. Okay, that's good. So every time we type something and we set the state, React re-renders. It's not reloading the page, it's just re-rendering this piece of code. Good. Okay. So now let me explain you a little bit about the bind this. Okay, so let me explain you what the bind this is doing right here. So let me just first delete this and see that error message again. I'm going to type an A, and we are getting cannot read property set state of undefined. Okay, we are just invoking, we are calling this function whenever we make a non-change. That's good. So it's going to go all the way to the top inside the function, and it's going to say this. Now, whenever we use a function just like this, whenever we make a reference to this, it's not going to be the class. It's not the class header. It's going to be this function. So whenever we use bind this, we are telling that function that whenever we are saying this and this function, we are saying that whenever we use this keyword inside of the function, that this means the actual class, means the parent component and not the actual function. That's why we are doing bind this. So we are telling that whenever we use this inside of the function, it means the class. So since the class has the setState method, we don't get an error message. It's working because the setState, it is defined. Okay. So now the thing is that you're going to crawl the web, maybe in the future, you're going to see some other examples of React, and you're going to find this on a different way. You're not going to see the bind this, and you're not going to understand why. So I'm going to delete the bind this, and of course, it's not going to work again. So what we're going to use a fat arrow function instead of a function. Now with ES6, the fat arrow functions are really, really smart. They know that whenever you make a reference to this, you're meaning the class and not the actual function. So if I just check again, it's going to work. So this is working. So in the future, you should avoid using bind and use the new method, which is going to be a fat arrow function. Bind, it's from the old school. You can still use it for a few other things, but if you can use a fat arrow function, that it's better. Now I'm telling you this again because you're going to find some examples with bind, and you're not going to know what to do if you don't know this. Okay, so what's next? Other things that you can find inside the web is going to be something like this. You're going to find a constructor, then inside you can have a super, and then inside you can have the setState, just like this. And inside it, instead of a state, you're going to find that state. So okay, and inside here you're going to have something like props. We're going to be talking about props in a minute, don't worry. So if I try this, something like this, it's still going to work. So what this is doing, and this is related to the previous section whenever we spoke about ES6 constructor. So this class, it's starting and we are extending component. And right here, we are creating our own constructor. And right here, we are bringing whatever props, whatever values we get from components, in this case, props. And then we are setting a new property for this constructor. So we are adding this state to the prototype. Now the thing is that whenever you use React, the state, it's already on the prototype of whatever you're extending. So there's no need to do setState. So I used this a lot in the past, but I'm not using it right now. I'm not just using it a lot. It's because state, it's already defined inside the component. It's already inside. So there's no need to do the constructor unless you really need for some reason. So if we type this, it's going to work. So you can manage and you can use state for whatever you want. I'm going to delete the hello. I'm going to leave the keywords empty, and I'm going to add a title just like this. Let's say that whenever the application loads, you want to have some content text right here that maybe it's going to come from a database. So this title is going to be the keywords, something like that, something real dumb. The keywords are colon. So instead of of course, comma, because this is an object. So instead of putting right here, maybe creating a div that says the title is whatever, we're gonna just call to this, that props, oh, sorry, not props, that state, and that title, just like that. And this is gonna print whatever you have inside the state. And of course, if the state changes, the application is gonna re-render, and you're gonna have the this.state, just like that, this.state, and then keywords. And whenever I type something, re-renders, type an A. Type something, is gonna re-render and type a D. and so on and so on. So, state, it's really useful for us. But the thing is that whenever you use state, it's going to be a little bit harder to maintain. So you should always avoid using class components with states because they use more memory and they are hard to maintain. If you can use a functional component, that's better. That's less code and less logic for your application. But of course, it's not bad using class components. If you really need it, you can use it, no problem. But always try to think a little bit more about what you're gonna do and what you're gonna need instead of using a class or instead of using a functional component. Okay, that's good. Let's keep moving forward. Remember I said props right here and then I made a mistake saying that props. Well, on the next section, we're gonna be talking about props.